Aloha, fellow filmmakers and storytellers. My name is Matthew Salanoa. I'm a director and filmmaker of over 17 years, and I invite you to my podcast, Action Movies Storytelling Through Action. On this podcast, as the title might suggest, I'm here to talk about some of my favorite action movies and how the storytelling is executed through the action. You see, I do think there is a misconception about action movies, and it's a misconception that I've heard since I went to college, since I went to film school, where action movies and Hollywood blockbusters were not given a lot of respect. And I understand why. I know that drama is considered the high art for many people. But for me, as a fan of action movies, and as even one of my teachers said, when asked by a fellow student, what movies am I supposed to watch to understand how to make movies? And what Michael Braverman said was, what do you want to make? Watch those movies, learn from them. And so, years after college, after absorbing everything I could about various different forms of cinema around the world, not that it was so thorough, but we did get a taste of everything around the world. After all of that, after college, finally I let that advice sink in, and I went back to the movies that mattered the most to me growing up as a kid: action movies, superhero movies. And I realized that all of the lessons I learned about drama, dramatic filmmaking, storytelling, they all still applied to action movies. And in fact, they were even more important in action movies because once you get to that action, it's a visual medium. You don't have a dialogue to explain what people are going through. You simply have to pay attention to the performance and absorb the emotionality of whatever's going on. So, with that in mind, I invite you to this podcast because I want to talk about what matters to me most, which is competent storytelling. Understanding that if you want to make an action movie, or if you want action to be an element of your story, and you're a fellow storyteller like me, and especially if you're a young one, I'm making this podcast for you, really, as the young me. I assume if I was young, I wish someone could have explained movies to me in this way. So with that in mind, I'm talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990 film directed by Steve Barron. I am a huge fan of this movie. I adore this movie. You'll see I have a collection of toys, but right here, although it's not quite as visible to see, it's not my best display. I have the NECA collection of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It is such a wonderful collection of figures. But this movie meant a lot to me growing up. There was something about it that was magical, that was amazing, that it included ninja mythology with this absurd concept of human-sized, human-shaped turtles with very human personalities, and yet this ancient grudge, not literally ancient, but this grudge match between two mentors, the turtle mentor Splinter and the leader of the Foot Clan, this criminal organization that's tearing apart New York City, that's led by Shredder, both of whom originate from Japan, where, based on the movie's mythology, Splinter was a rat who studied the martial arts of his master, who was a very impeccable warrior who had gotten killed by young Shredder. And it was all over the love of a woman. So right off the bat, I'm just going through the backstory of a movie I haven't even started talking about yet. And already there's an action sequence that is entirely about story. So right from the backstory of Shredder and Splinter, Shredder's master or father, in this case kind of both, is killed by an enemy over the love of one woman. And this is what my screenwriting teacher would call conflict being two forks, one stake, meaning that two people wanted the same thing, but one decided to kill the other for it and ended up killing both of them, all out of this rage and feeling the need to have something that someone else had. And so with that in mind, I'm going to get into the plot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles If you haven't seen the movie, I'm highly recommending you watch it first. Spoiler free, it's a kid friendly movie, an action packed movie where the storytelling, I'm saying this storytelling is superb and far underrated, even though it is a popular movie. I don't think people quite appreciate how well made the movie actually is. So I'm going to go into this movie spoiling it from the top, and I'm just going to go through the plot elements. I'm not going to talk about every single part of this movie. I'm not even going to talk all the way through every point, but I'm just going to go through how the action tells the story. And if you come along with me with this ride, I hope you'll come out with a stronger appreciation for how well made this film is. So let's get into it now. Welcome to Action Movies, storytelling through action. And hopefully there's some kind of cool intro here. All right, so Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles starts off with this montage led by a newscast report about a series of crimes, a series of unusual thefts happening across New York City. Essentially, this crime wave, as it's depicted through the filmmaking, and I'm going to get right into how the filmmaking is great right up front. Across this montage, we see multiple people watching television or moving products into a store or doing various different things throughout their days. We have a delivery man. He pulls a box out of the back of his delivery truck. You see the delivery truck is packed with boxes. He walks over and hands the box to its intended recipient, and the camera follows him. So this is all one shot. And his walk to this person is only about 5 seconds. And he walks back. And so all of a sudden, the delivery truck is empty. A completely packed delivery truck, emptied like that. And this is what all the series of crimes look like, where literally another victim, she's watching her TV, she's on the fire escape, and she looks away. I think her phone rings or something like that. And when she looks back, her TV is gone. And again, this is in an instant. But when she does look down at the bottom of the fire escape, she does see a kid running away with her TV. So across the montage, you see that these ninjas are good. They're not great. They're not flawless, but they're pretty good. You get an essence that they're super fast. And they have some kind of method of doing things quickly, but they're not perfect. They're still getting spotted. So we know that it's a series of thefts, and we know from watching this montage that it's actually a bunch of teenagers or younger kids committing these crimes. So this is a huge wave happening across the whole city, and it's shown visually. Now, while this may not count as violence, this is still action. Action does not necessarily mean violence. Action is simply movement, what people choose to do while in motion. And motion is how you show character or define character. My previous episode was all about defining character. So how is this criminal element defined? They're very sneaky, they're very fast, not quite perfect, and they're kids, they're youngsters. So this is our criminal element being defined. This is what they do. This is what they're after. They're obviously stealing goods so they can sell them and make money. But when we get introduced to our heroes, it's a completely different deal. After this whole montage, we're introduced to April O'Neil, who's leaving the news station, and a couple teenagers grab her and shake her up, and they're trying to steal her purse. She reaches into her purse trying to grab pepper spray or something like that. They start to rough her up, and just before it seems like things could go from bad to worse, all of a sudden, we hear the whistle of something being thrown through the air, and the light gets smashed out by a weapon. And all of a sudden, it's all dark. And all of a sudden, you hear all the martial arts whooshes. And you hear the giggle of someone. You don't know who it is. But then all of a sudden, the lights come on. April O'Neil is disheveled, but okay. And the bad guys are knocked out or tied up. And the heroes, whoever helped her out, is nowhere to be found. So, in this instance, we are shown that our heroes are also ninjas by the same film language. And this film language being that something happens off screen very quickly that indicates the skill and speed of our characters, of our primary characters. So if the criminal thugs are pretty sneaky, pretty good, but not perfect, we know by this sequence that these heroes are basically flawless in not being seen what they're doing. But they have rescued this woman from bad thieves who, might have done something much worse to her after their initial attempt to steal her purse. And something important that happens when the police come up to her, she realizes she sees the weapon that blew out the light. And it's a psi blade. A psi blade belonging to Raphael. And the next thing we see her from the point of view from underneath a lifted manhole cover. And then we see the turtly eyes of Raphael. And as she pockets the psi blade, he goes, "Damn it." Meaning, that he has made a mistake. He was not supposed to leave any evidence behind that he was there. And so this next sequence, we get into the fun Ninja Turtles theme, and we're watching the turtles walk down and celebrate their victorious event. But it's the people celebrating are Leonardo, Donatello, and Michelangelo. And slowly walking behind them, frustrated, angry, is Raphael. Now, he's not just frustrated and angry because his character is frustrated and angry, although that's his character trait, right? That's what defines him against everyone else. When everyone else can relax and celebrate a good job done, Raphael is hard on himself and is punishing himself for his failure. And this carries itself into the very next scene where the turtles enter their secret lair. They're celebrating, they're patting each other on the back, and Splinter arrives, and they immediately become respectful, and they kneel and bow before him as both father and master. So all of what I'm describing is visual storytelling. They don't need to have them say, "Oh, I respect you as father and master." The fact that he appears and they immediately show respect tells you how they were raised, how they were trained to behave, and what's expected of them from this person. But it is out of respect and love. It's a very specific thing being established. But when Raphael comes in, again, he's behind the rest, and he is not bowing. He's too caught up in thought. He's too angry at himself. And he's just immediately, as Splinter is saying, "You must remember never ever to reveal yourselves because your anonymity is your power." And that's when Raphael freaks out and says, "Okay, I lost the psi. Okay, I lost the psi, but I'll get it back. I'll get it back." And Splinter just says, "It's okay. It is lost. It's fine." He's not worried about this minor mistake. And yet, this mistake, this opening action sequence, which technically happens off screen, it's the start of the rest of the movie. And here's another thing I want to discuss. You might consider Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles an ensemble cast, or you might say, well, all the turtles are the main characters. Now, this is another mistake a lot of my fellow students coming out of college would still say. They would think even the X-Men, oh, it's an ensemble cast, so everyone's the main character, right? That is not the truth. Every story has a main character. There must be one person through which the rest of the story is filtered and centered, a person who is the emotional focus, What happens to them is what drives the rest of the movie. And this whole opening conflict, Raphael's inner conflict, his conflict with Splinter of saying, I lost it, okay? As if he's being blamed, as if Splinter would be upset with him over this, even though Splinter's clearly not upset. And it's this conflict that establishes that Raphael, he really has higher standards for himself than the other turtles have for themselves. Now they're all proficient. And in fact, everyone else, they successfully knocked out those bad guys without losing a weapon. So his high standard for himself is not being met. He's not meeting the standard of everybody else. And he feels that he should. But instead of telling everyone in a calm way, I just feel like I lost, I feel like I failed, and opening up and being vulnerable, he shouts, he lashes out, he's angry. That's his character. That's the way he sees things. That's the way he behaves. And you can see it right after they saved April and they're walking through the sewer. Visually, you see the team, the rest of the team is unified in their experience, but he is not. So that's telling you visually who the main character is. It's telling you, at the very least, who's going through a journey in this story. So this single element of the missing side blade is what triggers future events in the movie. So again, even though technically the action was off screen, we have visual action, visual behaviors establishing our world. The bad guys are ninja-like thieves, but they're thieves, they're criminals. And our heroes are also ninjas, but they're much better at being undetected, with the exception of this one mistake. Again, good, not flawless. So Raphael's frustration over this failure that to Splinter is not that big of a deal, but it's so crucial. It's so important to Raphael that while everyone else calms down and eats pizza, Raphael goes out to blow off steam and go see a movie. And this leads us to our next action sequence, which is Raphael leaves the movie theater. He doesn't like the movie he's watching, Critters 2. Who makes this stuff? And then as he's walking on the sidewalk, that's when two kids rip off a woman's purse and hop the wall into the park, and Raphael follows them. But the person that they meet when they enter the park is none other than Casey Jones. And he starts beating the kids pretty badly when Raphael shows up and basically tells them, hey, what you're doing is wrong. You shouldn't be roughing up these kids. And Casey has the exact opposite attitude. It's like, no, these kids are violent and rough and they mishandled this woman and they need to be taught a lesson. And Raphael says, not by you, pal, which leads to them fighting each other. And it is a bit of a comical fight. It's not an intense fight. It's not a fight of adversaries necessarily, but rather rivals, rather two people who have a different attitude about how to approach the same problem. Again, two forks, one steak. So this conflict leads us to a very humorous battle that ends with Casey Jones defeating Raphael. And again, Raphael just filled with rage that he's failed again, feeling incompetent, beaten by a person this time. And he chases after Casey Jones. Casey Jones gets away. And you get the great scene when the taxi hits Raphael, but he just rolls off of it. And in the car, the taxi driver looks at his passenger, and the look on the passenger's face is he's just so shocked at what he just saw. And he's like, was that a giant turtle? Yeah, you're going to LaGuardia, right? It's just the casual New York attitude. And ironically, a little trivia tidbit, the passenger in that car is the actor who plays Raphael. So it's wonderful little behind the scenes information. But this action scene, the defeat of Raphael, It leads to Raphael returning home late. It's dark, and Splinter has been waiting up all night for him to return. Now, this is actually a very tender thing that really shows the father-son relationship, that he just wants to make sure his son gets home. So Raphael gets home, and he's just so beat up. He's lost his fury, but he's just crushed. Splinter tells him to come over, and Raphael kneels before him as he was supposed to at the beginning when they first saw Splinter. And Splinter explains essentially the speech that for you storytellers, you have to pay attention to this stuff, because this is the stuff that lets you know that this is the main character. And not only is this the main character, but what Splinter says, it's entirely about his character arc. As James D'Alessandro, my screenwriting teacher, would say, what is a story? Well, story is character. And what is a character? Character is conflict. So conflict is character, character is story. So this whole conflict that Raphael has with everyone is really about himself and his feeling of incompetence at his failures, and that he bears the weight of it so heavily because he feels so frustrated with his lack of ability or his failure to achieve the way everyone else achieves. And this is what this speech is about, where essentially Splinter says, I have raised all of you and taught all of you how to do the things that you do. But what separates you from your brothers is that while everyone else works together to deal with problems, you deal with your problems on your own. And remember that you are loved and you are part of this family. And remember that I am your father and I care about you anyway. And it's such a powerful performance, such a powerful bit of puppeting execution. And when you see Raphael crying at this speech, it even makes me emotional just thinking about it. You realize the power that Splinter has in Raphael's life. And not only that, the importance of Splinter trying to help his son grow and not punish himself so harshly that he fails to see the forest for the trees. He's trying to remind him that he's a part of a family and that he's loved, and he doesn't have to fight his battles alone. And yet part of Raphael's problem is that he keeps separating himself and fighting his battles alone. And in essence, sticking together is what keeps a family together. So I think this is a really beautiful, powerful scene. It is by itself the scene that differentiates the movie from the other Turtle movies, and I'm including the remakes and everything like that. This is a very personal, intense, emotional scene, really well performed by the Jim Henson crew, and the voices performed excellently by the voice cast. This is such a wonderful combination of directing, performance, special effects, and I mean special, not visual. It wasn't created in a computer. It's such a wonderful combination of talents. And not only that, one little trivia tidbit about this scene is that, according to the commentary from the director, which is only available on a specific DVD, but thankfully I saw it on YouTube. According to the commentary, this scene, because of the camera move where it's supposed to go from the close-up of Raphael to the close-up of Splinter, and then show Splinter touching tenderly Raphael's head, because of the complexity of the camera move and everything entangled with that, the scene essentially had to be shot into a mirror. So they're still photographing the event, but they couldn't get technically close to it. So they had to use a mirror in order to accomplish the scene. I would love to see the behind the scenes on that. But this is one of my favorite scenes because it's so emotional, it's so powerful. But we only get this scene because of the opening action scene, which again, it's off screen. The action is off screen, but that's part of the film language of this movie. That the ninjas are so skilled that they can do whatever they need to do and you'll never see them do it. That film language was established with the criminals and established how it's supposed to look by our heroes when they save April O'Neil. But that missing side blade is what leads to all this frustration. And then the next action scene, being defeated by Casey Jones, leads to this scene. Each action scene is an integral part of how the character deals with his life. That you realize he lost to Casey Jones not only because he was alone, but because of his incredible temper that fails him in the case of thinking about what he's doing. And this scene is all about his father slash his mentor reminding him that he's a part of a family and that he doesn't need to do things by himself. And this is the hill, the wall that Raphael has to climb over by the end of the movie, which he will. Oh, refreshing. Coca-Cola. Feel the refreshing feeling of an Amazon rainforest pouring with rain. Coca-Cola. For when you've already had your liter of water. Stop reminding me, Jenny! Coca-Cola, refreshing. These ads is whack, man. So as the movie goes on, we continue to see April O'Neil, and she's ruffling feathers, she's frustrating the chief of police because she's trying to get her story out and trying to not only that, but influence how the police do their work, because she's seeing that the police are unwilling to acknowledge that there's a ninja element in New York City. But if they just would, if they would start looking where people are telling them to look, they might actually catch the people committing all these crimes. But the chief of police does not want to believe that ninjas are the ones causing his problems because it sounds ridiculous, even though all of the witnesses are saying something like that's happening. But this ends up leading her to make a news report. And the news report, she tells the stories of her witnesses and also explains that the police chief does not believe in what she's uncovered, and this is going to be at the cost of the safety of the people of the city, which leads to a scene of that same news report being watched by the Ninja Turtles. So they all learn who she is right then and there on television, say, oh, that's that girl we saved. Ooh, I'm in love. Michelangelo, I'm in love. You know what I mean? Michelangelo is, if he's not your favorite, it's okay, but come on, he's the best. Everyone else is celebrating this moment of, nay, I know who that is, but as everyone else is celebrating it, Raphael's like, wait a minute, she has my missing side blade. He doesn't say it, it's not said with dialogue, but you know, if you're paying attention to the movie and you're using your head, this is what I find very important. It's something that really frustrates me that filmmakers say, that is something that I hear reviewers say. Critics say these things, but when filmmakers say these things, it really grinds my gears. When people say that an action movie or any movie should explain itself, I think that is a ridiculous notion, especially if you study movies, especially going back to the silent film era, watching Charlie Chaplin. Everything watching Charlie Chaplin is visual. You have to understand what's going on by watching his performance. Now, there are some dialogue bubbles that explain what cannot be said through performance, but nonetheless, you have to use your head to pay attention to what's going on. When Charlie Chaplin makes a friend, loses a friend, wonders where his friend is, you have to watch him and use your own mind to think about what's going on in the first place, follow the story, and put two and two together to figure out what's going on. So I don't think in the modern era, with that being the history of film, that you have to think to watch a movie. That should not be a criticism. And if you're a filmmaker, I'm sorry, but that is what's holding you back. You have to use your head when you watch movies. Otherwise, why are you watching the movie? It's not a comic book. You can't flip back. It is a bit of a memory game where you have to remember crucial elements that happen across the movie if the filmmaking is doing its job right. And if you are being an attentive audience member, then you're going to catch and follow these things as they happen. Much like a running joke in a comedy, understanding the story is catching visuals, catching looks, and realizing that they mean something across the movie. Just like when you watch a romance comedy, right? You see two characters in struggling relationships, but when they meet in the middle, somewhere in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and you see they exchange looks of each other, there's interest, there's intrigue. The performance is telling you that, oh, I'm attracted to this person. There's something about this person that I'm just connecting with, and it's without words. The fact that you have to track that into the next scene, into the following scenes, when one character is swooning, I can't stop thinking about this person I just met. Or the other person's like, their mind is on something. Their mind, no matter what they're doing, their mind is on something. And you know, because of the close up in their looks at each other, what a pretty girl. What a handsome man. You know, from those close ups, it's communicating how important this meeting is. That when they're talking about the other person or thinking about the other person, you know that's what's going on. Because it's a romance comedy. Obviously, you're letting the genre dictate your assumption, but nonetheless, the same rules apply to all forms of storytelling, especially visual. So if you know in the opening scene that he saw April O'Neil pocket his blade, his side blade, which is the thing that was missing, which is the thing that he was freaking out about, then when he puts on his clothes and leaves, where are you going? I'm going out. You don't have to assume the next scene, but when you see her leave her work and go down to the subway, and the camera moves back and you see Raphael in the same outfit watching her, you realize, oh, okay, he probably wants the side blade back. But then the next thing that happens is that she comes down to the subway. No one is there. She's missed her train. And the Foot Clan, now dressed clad in black with little red ninja things, they have arrived and with a message. And they slap her in the face and say, the message is stop talking to the police. Stop saying what you're saying. And it again appears like they're going to go a bit further than just deliver this message. She defends herself and pulls out the side blade, the thing that Raphael's after. Unspoken, not explained. But if you're watching and paying attention to the movie, you realize, oh, he came after her for the side blade. And it just happened to be a collision that at the same time, the villains, they were watching the same news story. When we go back a little bit and we go back to that news story, who else was watching the news story? It was Shredder. Shredder's watching it. We see him in silhouette. We don't even see who he's talking to. But he looks off camera and says, find her, silence her. And then he picks up his own little dagger, setting up his weapon, and throws it at the television, and it stabs right into her head. So that is visually communicating that the bad guys are coming for her too, and probably to wipe her out. But in this scene, because we know Raphael was coming, although the way the scene goes, we forget about it, just when it's about to go from bad to worse, that's when Raphael shows up angry, shouting, but he's shouting not to be un-ninja like, but he's shouting to get their attention and then to immediately enter the scene and defend April. And he successfully knocks away the bad guys, drives them off of her, but then he has a knocked out April and he has to carry her away and protect her again. And as he's carrying her into the train tracks, just one of the ninjas is still around and notices where he's going and follows him. And so when he brings her to the lair, we get the great scene where all the turtles are like, you did what? And she's laying on the couch and he's like, well, what was I supposed to do? And then we get April waking up and seeing and seeing Splinter and freaking out, and then she tries to justify what's happening. Oh no, I saw you, the turtle. You were on the street just before I was attacked, and the rat. Well, there's lots of rats in New York City, so this is a dream. Ah. I love this scene. Judith Hogue is so beautiful and excellent. She's just, I think her energy is so right on for this character in this movie. I really thought she was a wonderful April O'Neil. She just had that kind of toughness, that kind of nosy, intrepid reporter attitude that I really liked. That she has that attitude of someone who's got conviction and who's ruffling feathers, but because she believes it's the right thing to do. And yet in this sequence, just complete opposite, totally freaked out, totally reverting to girl settings of, oh my god, it's a rat, or anybody. I think even guys freak out too. But it's just totally, it's just such a funny scene. But again, why does this collision happen? Why is she meeting all of these people? It starts from the first action scene that's off camera, where the turtles beat up the robbers and the side blade falls. So if that side blade never got left in the opening scene of the movie, all the rest of the events of the movie never would have happened. If he kept his side blade, he wouldn't be frustrated. He would be celebrating with everybody else. If he hadn't gotten beaten up by Casey Jones, again, he wouldn't be so frustrated that when he comes home late, his father mentor wouldn't have to remind him he's part of a family and that he's loved. But if April O'Neil was not on the news, he wouldn't have realized where she was and where to look for her. And the same being with the villains, hence the collision of events. But none of it happens without him forgetting the side blade in the beginning of the movie. This is why the remakes don't work. This is why the sequels are less entertaining, because our heroes become perfect. Our heroes become flawless, and their character traits have nothing to do with the story itself. A story is made out of character, a character is made out of conflict. If the character has no conflict, then it's just empty character traits. Their character traits have everything to do with the telling of the story. If you look at the Back to the Future trilogy, the first movie, Marty McFly is a pretty brave and confident kid. He has some doubts in himself, but what really irks him is that his father is a coward who lets his boss bully him around and wreck his car and doesn't stick up for himself. His mother is a quiet alcoholic who's upset with her life. And really, all the kids are a bit spoiled, but also very miserable because their parents are miserable. And when Marty goes back in time, he sees the young version of his father, who is genuinely cowardly beyond belief. But he sees the young version of his father also has ambitions and has dreams and things that he wants to do. And this is where Marty learns about his father and starts to have a different opinion about him. But it becomes, because of Marty's interference in the timeline, he's now made his mother infatuated with himself, and he must push his father to become braver than he is. And it's the end of the movie that the father finally stands up to the bully who becomes his boss in the future. And it does change things. Now he does fall in love with the mother, but now he's no longer going to be the coward who runs away from a fight. Now, on the flip side, when we get to the sequels, the filmmakers remember that storytelling is still important. So now that we've dealt with that emotional journey, it's closed. That loop is done. We still have a main character who has to make it through a two-part sequel movies. He has to make it through part 2, and he has to make it through part 3. They've planned these movies side by side, shot them together. But our main character now has to have something to connect him emotionally across these movies. And what is it? It all comes down to the same issue of cowardice versus courage. And Marty's problem is that he's courageous, but he is afraid of being considered a coward. Now, it is a bit cheesy, but it still holds the movies together. when you realize his fear of being called a coward is what gets him into action scenes. And not only that, the threat of the third movie is that the threat established in the second movie is that there's something that happens to him that destroys his entire life, and it's all because of his temperament and his fear of being called a coward. And it's not until we get to the end of the third movie that we see that event, but it takes the entire third movie, which really addresses this problem in various ways, where he meets his great 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 grandfather and learns that he had a great great uncle who had the same temperament issue and was killed, and that this issue is what gets him killed. And it takes that emotional journey to string together all of the fun hijinks that we get into, that we understand where Marty's coming from emotionally, that his journey is integral to us enjoying the fun because we have a character that we understand, we relate to. His character traits have everything to do with why the action is happening in the first place. So, with that understanding, when we look at Ninja Turtles in this first movie, what carries the movie and what moves the plot forward is the character choices and the characters' concerns. And that these story elements are really just absent in the sequels. Although the second movie's fun, the third movie's technically fun but weird, the sequels and the remakes do not have the character traits contributing to the story elements. And that's what makes a movie great and what separates it from the terrible sequels or other movies of other genres. When you see a great movie, it's often because the character is going through something. They're either going through a transformation, well, they're always going through a transformation, but they're either going through a transformation or they're being tested to keep their own selves together. But it's always an emotional aspect that holds the gel of the action and the fun, that if we did not have the emotional aspect, the action does not have that much value. So, going even further into this movie, because of the side blade and the frustration, because of the news report telling the heroes and villains where April O'Neil is, and because Raphael, in looking for his side blade, comes across this sequence where April is again about to get into trouble. That's what puts April in the layer of the turtles, but it's also what leads that one ninja to find the turtle base because he's following Raphael. But Raphael's only tracked because he is carrying April O'Neil. So every single aspect of the story is either self-evident, or if you think about it, if you're paying attention, you can understand why it's happening. But there's the emotional component as well. But each thing leads to the next thing. Nothing just happens because something needs to happen. That's piss poor storytelling, and nothing's blatantly described for you beyond what is needed out of the story in the moment and what feels natural to the characters in that moment. That is good storytelling. That is the top tier level of what storytelling should try to achieve. If you're trying to stuff so much into a scene, I was watching the pilot of Paradise and I had to stop at 27 minutes in because the dialogue was so overstuffed. They were stuffing setup and character into the same scenes, and it just became so overwhelming and unbelievable that anyone would talk like this, do these things, and it just felt like things were just happening. Now, maybe if I'd kept watching, it would tie together better, but this is what I urge you as a filmmaker and a storyteller against. Don't be so insecure that you feel that your dialogue needs to say everything. If you're a good writer, visually we should be getting a lot of information just from the behaviors and actions that people are doing. And those behaviors and actions should be how we measure the character across the story. Whereas if there's no conflict to begin it, it's not really a story. If no conflict at a certain point appears, it's not a story, it's just a plot. But plot, let me remind you, is only there to service the story. Now, the plot might include action, it might include a lot of fun sequences, but if it doesn't service the story and the character, then it is superfluous and does not matter. Because plot, I like to think of like a dish. When you're making a dish and you make rice, it's just rice. It's just a base. It's just the side to go along with your steak or your chicken or whatever delicious curry that you want to put on the rice, curry or sauce. You know, it's just like French fries is not the meal. It's the burger that's the meal. The French fries just comes with it. It's a support. It just makes the burger more fun or enjoyable to eat. And this is what plot is to story. It just helps spruce up the story and keep the story going. So, along our journey, we have this training sequence with the foot where there's a little competition and one foot trainer beats another trainer. And that's when Tetsu comes in, the right hand to Shredder, our villain. He comes in and grants the winner the red headband, which has the symbol of Shredder on it. And this leads us to this epic sequence inside of an abandoned warehouse in Ohio. I think it's Ohio. Ohio for New York. But they're in this abandoned warehouse where all of the kids, all of the thief kids are lined up watching as Shredder enters. And Shredder enters with a long shadow across a dimly lit floor. And you see as people unfurl Shredder's cape to reveal all the blades on his outfit. And the camera comes around and you see he's wearing this helmet headpiece, but it's also got a mask covering his face. And you can just barely tell that there's some scarring on his face underneath it. A clue to things to come. And it's in this sequence that Shredder explains, you have all come here because your families disowned you or your families fell apart. And you, and he's talking to the winner of the competition, you have shown that you belong in this family. You are part of the Foot Clan now. And all of you, he addresses the people not wearing black, the kids that are still in normal clothing. All of you now are part of this family, and I am your father. And it's such a dark, scary scene. And he's essentially trying to figure out, well, we need to figure out as a family and as your father, we all need to figure out who it is who's getting in the way of our operations and stop them. And then all of a sudden, one kid raises his hand and the camera just pushes in on him. And it's this red-headed kid who earlier in the movie, when we meet April O'Neil, her boss is in her apartment saying he's worried about her, she should get off this case, it's kind of getting scary, the chief of police is breathing down his neck. And he has brought his son, his sort of wayward son, who he's just picked up from juvenile hall for stealing. And they have this contentious relationship where it seems that the mother has either died or left. It's never quite explained, but you realize, actually it might have been explained in this scene, I just forgot. But we realize that this April's boss is a single father. And they're just struggling to make things work right now. And in the middle of this drama, you see that Danny, this redhead kid, he just feels alone. He feels like he has to deal with things alone. And his father is a bit old school, where he just blatantly complains and he kind of blames the kid for his behavior. And he's not really being a good, emotionally receptive father, and he's not quite leading the situation properly. He's just leading with his anger. And it's this issue that the father has that you see it scares the kid, and it's just making the kid worse and have more problems. And so you can kind of see across this movie that we have this parallel storytelling of fathers, right? The first father we meet is Splinter, and he's a warm and comforting father. He trains his kids well. He stays up late waiting for his kid to make sure he gets home safe. And when his kid is emotional, he calmly talks to him and tries to help him realize that he doesn't need to do things alone. When we meet the second father, it is Danny's father, and he is a frustrated man dealing with things with his anger first and not really helping his son grapple with the issues because he himself can't really grapple with the issues. He's trying to be a dad, he's trying to be a boss, and both his son and his employee are kind of just doing wild things that he can't control, and he doesn't know what to do or how to fix the situation. His hands are tied, or at least they seem tied. And this will be the father's emotional journey to learn how to talk to his son. Because later on in the movie, the father has a scene where he's driving around with Danny in the backseat of the car, frustrated because his son has been picked up for stealing again. And you see the dad, he's complaining, he's ranting, and Danny says, "I'm sorry," and with such attitude. And you see the father, I like the way he plays it, where he just kind of feels like he needs to talk this way. He's angry, and he doesn't really look angry when he says it. He just feels like, I gotta say this to you. And he just says, not as sorry as you're gonna be when we get home. Hinting maybe he does beat his son, or at least he spanks him, or maybe hits him with a belt. Something. Or at least he's hinting that he's going to start doing it. And this emotional reaction from the dad, trying to be this imposing figure, trying to lead with fear, is what drives the kid to jump out of the car and run away from him. And now his kid is missing, somewhere out there on the streets of New York City, doing who knows what with who knows who. And then we have the Shredder, who is dominating. He's a dominating presence. He's calm like Splinter, but his calm comes with intimidation and secretly, we don't know it yet, but the threat of your annihilation if you do not please him, which is the same thing that the father was threatening Danny in the first place. So Danny has gone from one potentially abusive father to an actually abusive father, not really knowing the difference and maybe not caring because he's just looking for some sense of family that he can hold on to.
Aloha, nerds! Check out the new toys from Marvel Legends Black Widow movie toy line. ScarJo's head has never looked more real. Florence Pugh looks almost exactly like she does on screen, and that does not look like Red Guardian. Olga Kurylenko, though, has never looked hotter. That's right, all the babes are in this Marvel Legends toy line. Go get it now on eBay because this was discontinued 2 years ago. Dun, 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 dun.
I had a family once. One night a drifter came calling, a vampire. He tried to make me decide which order they died in. I survived and he escaped, but I learned what he was. I learned his weaknesses: garlic, silver, sunlight, and I trained. And I traveled. I will find him.
stand in my way. Name's Whistler. These ads is whack, man.
When the turtles take April home and they have another good laugh and they're eating pizza, again, it's just, and now April's learning about them. They love pizza. They can eat pizza all day long. And they have a good time, but when the turtles come back to their base, they find Splinter's gone. And this sends Raphael into his worst emotional scream, a scream that has horrified me since I was a little kid. When the camera circles around him in that dark room, you see their base is trashed, but it's circling around him and it just gets faster and shakier, and you just see Raphael go, ah! You know, and it's such a terrifying scene, not just because of what's happened, but because of how he emotionally expresses his suffering. And then, you know, the camera pulls out of the sewer drain and you hear the echo of his scream, and you just see a pedestrian go, what was that? You know, so we're in the emotion, but we also have the grace of being pulled out of that emotion just for, you know, a little levity. But again, that wouldn't have happened without all the previous events in the story. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, although yes, it's a comedy show and it's very silly and irreverent, they still have storytelling principles that are, this happens, therefore this happens, or this happens because this happens, or this happens but this happens. That their storytelling format is that each scene does lead or drive or is motivated by the next scene or previous scene, however it works out. But there's something driving the sequences. There's a motivation. There's something, a goal that each person's after, a goal, an intent, that something is pushing these scenes along. Everything is important to what happens in the following scene. So the action is great, right? We're having a lot of fun watching Raphael beat up the foot in the subway sequence. But it leads to consequences when he doesn't escape from them cleanly because he's carrying April O'Neil. That's the advantage, that the one guy he didn't knock out follows and is able to track the whereabouts of the base. So each event, and even the following and the tracking, is action. It's explaining to you how things are happening visually, rather than just, oh, somebody saying, oh, well, I followed them. We didn't see you follow them. Okay. You know, it's the dialogue trying to replace action and tension. But you get incredible tension from just that following sequence by itself. But this then leads to the turtles returning to April's apartment, revealing that Splinter has been kidnapped. The boss has returned. So this is the scene immediately before what I described earlier, where he's in the car with Danny and he's threatening him to beat him up. And that's when Danny runs out of his car and escapes into New York City. The very preceding scene before that, April's boss shows up at the apartment, and the turtles establish again that they can disappear like ninjas. And April keeps seeing the turtles in every mirror and every reflection, and then they look back and see her. Just when it looks like the boss is about to see the turtles, they have disappeared again. So, you know, we get a real reestablishment of what was established in the opening scene, right? So every element of the movie matters to later parts in the movie, setups and payoffs, right? So, and again, this is not violent action, but it is still action that defines our characters and keeps what they do alive, while also making a fun scene. We get a completely different type of tension here. It's a comedic tension, but it is a tension. And it's really makes a wonderful, delightful scene. And this movie is made up of a variety of action and a variety of humor. This movie just has a really good palette. And although this movie is not a balls out action, I'm going to go back to the opening just one more time. When we look at the opening scene and essentially the lights are out and the action is off screen, here's a little trivia for the beginning of this movie. Originally, the director says in the commentary, there was a scripted opening action sequence between the turtles and the Foot. And it was supposed to be an epic sequence that really established our two warring ninja factions. Unfortunately, they didn't have the money to do it. So they decided instead to focus the opening on the deaths around the city, and then just to use their film language to show how we have this competing ninja faction through the lights going out and all that stuff. Now that's wonderful. See, that's what true filmmaking is about also. It's like they planned for a big action scene, they couldn't afford it. So what did they do instead? Well, what's important to the story? What's important to the movie is we do have this threat of deaths and the whole ninja angle. So we're just going to lean on that. If they're ninjas and the whole thing is that they can disappear, then we're going to lean on that, and that'll be a way we establish their talents and skills still. So that's what you got to do as a filmmaker. You got to be light on your feet and realize the best laid plans go to waste. So you have to be ready for things to change. So I think this is a very effective lesson for you young storytellers, that no matter what you plan, you have to remember what's the most important part of your movie. That is what you're going to have to rely on when other things fall apart, because you still got to shoot and you still got to execute. So anyway, after this whole sequence where the turtles are disappearing and she gets the boss to leave, and then the boss has the scene in the car with Danny, which drives him to run away, we come back to April and the turtles. And they are checking out her attic, which is actually, it's an entire store, and it's full of antiques and stuff like that. And it's revealed that April had a father who died, and he left the store on the top of the building, and she just didn't want to get rid of it because it just reminded her of her dad. And she says, I guess that's pretty silly, huh? And they say, no, it's not silly, because they understand they're missing their father. They don't know where he is. And there's a bit of conflict where Raphael is saying, we should be out there looking for the Foot right now. And Leonardo, the leader, is saying, no, we don't even know where to start looking. So April has been researching this. We should talk to her and see what she finds and see if she can help us locate a place to at least start looking. Otherwise, we're just going to be looking randomly across the city. We're not going to find anything. And this conflict leads Raphael to again leaving the group to go blow off his steam. And April's asking them, well, is that normal? And they're like, yeah, he's just gonna go blow off steam, he'll be back. And this leads to Raphael hopping around on the roof, trying to do some exercises to blow off his steam, literally shadow boxing the air. And then we cut to another rooftop where Casey Jones is just chilling out, looking at the view, and all of a sudden he sees, is that who I think it is? And he pulls out little binoculars and he sees Raphael hopping around on the roof. So this is setup, right? This is build-up. We don't see Casey Jones again until the next action sequence. So as Raphael's hopping around on the roof, the Foot Clan appears to finish what they started in the subway scene. And we get our next major action sequence where it's Raphael by himself against the Foot Clan. And now he's defeating people very well at first. And the dialogue is giving us some information. Raphael's beating up the first little group of Foot Clan soldiers very easily. And he asks them, where'd you guys get your training? The abridged version of ninja? I'm butchering the joke. But in essence, he is confirming what's sort of been established at the front of the movie, which is these Foot Clan people, these children, teenage ninjas, they're not actually trained right. They're kind of trained in a rushed way that makes them weaker warriors against him, who's clearly had the higher class of training because he's beating them up so well. But unfortunately, the Foot Clan has more numbers and he gets overpowered. And this gets intercut with a fun little montage of April showing the turtles all the antiques and all the little gags, and they're messing around with each other still. And then at the right line, yeah, Raphael will drop in when he's ready, and then all of a sudden Raphael smashes through the ceiling window and crashes down, and he's down for the count now. And now it's the three remaining turtles against the entire Foot Clan. And we get an even bigger action sequence that's amazing and fun and hilarious. And it all ends up with the entire floor crashing to the floor below. And just when even more foot ninjas have appeared to replace the ones who were knocked out by the previous action sequences, just when they're at the moment of truth, all of a sudden other lights turn on, and Casey Jones in his mask from earlier in the movie has shown up and starts whooping ass. And so all these building blocks have to occur for us to get to the sequence and understand why these things are happening, right? The fact that our earlier action scene establishes Raphael meeting Casey Jones and their conflict, and that Casey Jones is able to defeat Raphael, a trained ninja. And as we see with Raphael versus the Foot Clan, Raphael beats the Foot Clan, one-on-one over and over again. So this really gives us the power scale that's coming into this room. Casey Jones replaces what is lost with Raphael and is able to bat away the foot soldiers just long enough for the gang to escape. But we don't get this. You see, this is where the action is a critical part of the storytelling. Action is not solely there for your entertainment, although it is. Action is there to put the pieces together. When you look at Star Wars and you look at the second movie, where Leia and Han and Chewie and the droids and C-3PO are all being chased by the Empire, and they're doing various different things that keep putting Han and Leia in scenarios where they're alone together. So when Leia's just trying to do her thing and Han is pressing her, saying, I know you're into me, I know you're into me. Later on, when they're being chased by the Empire and they hide inside of an asteroid, that's when a bat fly, a weird alien looking bat flies up against the windshield. I'm like, what is that? So they go outside, and it's an opportunity for them to get closer to each other, because now they're both scared and they're huddling with each other, and it's a moment for them to look out for each other, which builds their character. So it's not a huge action sequence, but it's an action sequence that ties them together, not unlike Attack of the Clones, the second picture in the prequel trilogy, where the whole movie, Anakin and Padme are having this whole conflict of should we hook up or not. We love each other, but we're not supposed to be together. You're a Jedi, I'm a senator. But at the end of the movie, we have the arena sequence where both Padme and Anakin are tied up and they're about to be fed to monsters. And it's in the moment preceding an action sequence, knowing that they're headed to potentially certain doom, is when they embrace each other and kiss each other truly for the first time. And then during the action sequence, we reestablish Padme's skill and her adventuring ability. But as they survive and as they look out for each other, it gives them moments to sort of be with each other. So action is a critical part of building character journeys. And in the case of this movie, without the action scene, which is more of a comedic action scene where Raphael meets Casey Jones, if that wasn't there, it wouldn't make sense for Casey Jones to appear later. They had to have some preceding incident that made them meet because they're not established yet. But when Casey Jones sees him on the rooftop and he's like, well, I got to go look into this, it's not spoken, but you figure it out as it goes. It's action, it's visual storytelling, and it's a movie that doesn't tell you. Casey Jones doesn't say, oh, yeah, well, we fought earlier in the movie, and so when I saw him on the rooftop, I was just like, I gotta go check this guy out. He doesn't say any of that. You just figure it out by the fact that he showed up. Now, there's a lot of movies that kind of make assumptions and do these leaps in logic, but this movie is very well executed in knowing exactly what needs to be shown for the audience to go along with the experience. You may not have it verbally explained to you, but intuitively, instinctually, as you're watching the movie, how it all lays together makes sense, and this is why. Because the building blocks are there to move the story along. So, when it comes to the ending of this action sequence, what happens is that unfortunately the building gets caught on fire. We start to see all of April's father's antiques get caught on fire, and as Casey Jones is defending the team so that they can escape, there's a phone call and a voice message is left by the boss saying that he has no choice but to fire April. So Casey Jones gets this information in the middle of a fight. But if he wasn't there for the fight, he wouldn't get that information. So when the gang escapes to this little town in the middle of nowhere where they're hiding from the foot, that's when Casey Jones lays on the information of what happens. So you see, every action scene has a critical moment. But not only that, this action scene is so critical that it actually takes Raphael out for the next 10 minutes of the movie, where Raphael is basically comatose and they have him in a bathtub and they're pouring water on him trying to help him heal. And it's a critical moment where we see Leonardo, who Raphael has had disagreements with, is actually the one who looks after him while he's healing. So despite having conflict with each other, they're actually the closer brothers, where you see Mikey and Donatello are just a bit more relaxed than the other two, and they're the ones hanging out. So even though we have a group of 4, and you may have grown up thinking that all 4 of them are the main characters because it's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even with a group of 4, we still have the segmenting of 2 brothers are closer to each other than the other 2. And this happens in flipped ways, where Mikey and Donatello, the more relaxed ones, are chilling out, eating pizza, doing what they want, every time Leonardo and Raphael fight. And Leonardo and Raphael fight because they're both strong personalities with strong convictions about how things should be done. But this also means that they're the ones who care the most about what happens to everybody. So, and in that conflict, even though they butt heads, when Raphael is down and for the count, it's Leonardo who's the first to check on him, and it's Leonardo who watches over him when he's healing inside that bathtub. So the action scene, although it was fun to watch and had lots of humor and had little story points that connected our characters together, it has this huge consequence of one of our heroes being down for the count, almost dying, which shifts the whole rest of the movie. Now you might think because Raphael is knocked out and we're seeing a little bit more of the other turtles, that that's kind of what makes all 4 of them the main characters at once. Granted, they are the main characters, but even amongst them, just like the X-Men, which is if you look at that movie, it is an ensemble cast, right? But there's still a main character of the X-Men, and it's Wolverine. Wolverine is the one for whom we are introduced to the X-Men world. He's the one Professor X explains everything to, and it's his emotional journey. Again, it's an unspoken emotional journey. He's the one who meets Rogue in the beginning, and Rogue is the one kind of expressing everything that's inside of him. where she's afraid of her powers, she's afraid of hurting people, and you kind of see with his performance that he has the same fears, but he's just not expressing it. But he's also this fear of being alone and unsafe. And it's by the end of the movie, Wolverine is willing to sacrifice himself to keep Rogue alive. And so that's what makes him the main character. He's going through the emotional journey. Everything that happens in the movie and the story is centered around him. And that's what's happening with Raphael. Although he gets taken out, it's an opportunity for the other characters to shine and to reveal what matters to them. And in the case of Leonardo, we see Leonardo watching over his brother, that despite having the most conflict, he is the one that cares the most and is making sure his brother's healing and waiting for him to wake up. And I really like the whole montage where April's drawing the turtles and defining what's going on. It's kind of like a comic book sequence where literally there's drawings, but also this whole montage that's just kind of explaining how people are dealing with the tragedy of losing their father and potentially losing their brother right in front of them. And the silly ones deal with it in a silly way, and the serious ones deal with it in a serious way. And that's what carries us through this whole montage. And it's when Raphael wakes up and it's Leonardo who's there. But what makes his waking up so much better is the fact that they had these conflicts. Now, their conflicts were shouting matches, but they weren't physical fights, but that's still a fight. It's still a conflict. Two forks over the same steak, right? It's still a conflict that expresses what the story has going on, you know what I mean? But because they have that conflict, it makes it so much more important that Raphael makes it out, so that the last thing they say to each other isn't that you're dumb and you should leave, it's fine. You know, you realize, like every family that's a true family, when something tragic happens, the family should close ranks and come together. And that's what makes the Turtles a real family. Because when we go back to the villains, and the Foot Clan has failed to kill the Turtles again, this is when Tetsu is talking to Shredder, and Shredder is just so disappointed in him, in the failure of training the men and the failure of capturing the Turtles, that Tetsu loses his own temper and he starts beating up people. And all of a sudden, one of the Foot Clan soldiers runs up trying to stop him from beating up and nearly killing another man, and Tetsu beats him up and kills him instead. And the man that he beats up and kills is the one who had earned his headband earlier in the movie when the Shredder gave him his mask. So you realize that this family, as these people are experiencing it, this family is an abusive family. It's not really a family because it's a conditional army. Shredder is only your father if you succeed for him, but if you fail him, he will kill you or let you die because your life does not actually matter to him. Revealing that this is not a family then this is an army for a general, and not only that, a corrupt and selfish general. So everyone experiences this and realizes the horror of it in the moment, and yet nobody changes what they're doing. Oh no, my haircut has changed. Okay, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you. This ended up being a much longer video than I thought it was going to be, and I realized, look, this is a long time to listen to someone yap, especially with no editing. So I decided to break this into 2 parts. So if you stick around for next week, part 2 will be out there, and I'll finish up my thoughts on this film. I just want to fight for you young filmmakers. I believe you deserve another filmmaker, especially someone who's still kind of in between. You know, I still got my values, but I haven't made it to the industry yet, so I'm not jaded. I haven't had it easy yet. I'm still just a guy with hopes and dreams, but I still have 20 years of experience from which I have my passion. And I just want to do this for you guys so that you can look at movies and make sure that however you approach your art, you don't have to do the things that I'm saying or pointing out, but I just want you to have this in your tool belt to know this is what another filmmaker did, and this is why the storytelling is so good. So with that in mind, thank you if you made it this far. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Mahalo and aloha. See me next week for part 2.